Ang susunod na programa ay rated PG. Patnubay at gabay ng magulang ay kailangan sa mga batang manonood.
Good evening. You are watching the Chairman's Report, brought to you by IBC 13 and the Commission on Filipinos Overseas. That is the agency under the Office of the President, mandated to connect the Filipino diaspora with the Philippines. I'm 𝐂𝐡𝐚𝐢𝐫𝐬, Chairman of the CFO and your program host. Tonight's discussion will center on the Inter-Agency Council Against Trafficking, or IACAT. That is a multi-agency body chaired by the Secretary of Justice and co-chaired by the Secretary of the Department of Social Welfare and Development. IACAT leads the country's efforts in preventing human trafficking, protecting victims, and prosecuting offenders with a strong focus on the vulnerabilities faced by our fellow Filipinos overseas. CFO is one of its members and serves as the chair of the IACAT Advocacy and Communications Committee, which leads efforts in public education, information campaigns, and stakeholder engagement to combat human trafficking. To protect migrants' welfare, the CFO partners with IACAT to assist trafficking victims, especially those harmed by illegal recruitment and exploitation, ensuring no Filipinos dream abroad, cost them their dignity or freedom. To lead tonight's discussion, we are joined by Undersecretary Nicolas Felix Nicky of the Department of Justice. He is the cluster head for the Human Security and Privacy Cluster, which includes IACAT, along with the Anti-Terrorism Council, the National Justice Information System, and Governance and Justice. Prior to his appointment as Undersecretary in 2022, he served as Assistant Secretary at the DOJ from 2020 to 2022. Before joining the DOJ, he was the Director of the UP Law Center's Institute of Government and Law Reform, while also serving as Assistant Professor at the UP College of Law. He graduated cum laude from the UP School of Economics and later earned his law degree from the UP College of Law and was admitted to the Philippine Bar in 2004. He also holds a master's degree in International Economic and Business Law from Kyushu University in Japan under the prestigious Young Leaders Program. With Undersecretary T's leadership, IACAT is strengthening safeguards and raising awareness to ensure every Filipino is protected from human trafficking, both at home and abroad. Undersecretary T, welcome to the Chairman's Report.
Thank you, Secretary King. Thank you for inviting DOJ and IACAT to your show.
Yes, so I hear that the record of the Philippines is pretty good, as evidenced by the U.S. State Department's Tier 1 ranking for 9 years, if I'm correct. But in the 9 months I've been with CFO, the activities in IACAT has been quite active. Is that just part of vigilance, or are there emerging threats that you're watching? What's the situation now in the Philippines in terms of human trafficking?
You're correct, Secretary, that the Philippines has been in the Tier 1 ranking of the U.S. TIP report for 9 consecutive years. We're aiming for a 10th consecutive year or a full decade this year. To maintain the Tier 1 ranking, it's not about the incidence of human trafficking, but it's about the effort. So there are countries who continue to have a human trafficking problem but remain in Tier 1 because the U.S. State Department sees that the effort of the country meets the minimum standards set by the U.S. State Department. And those minimum standards cover a variety of aspects. It's not just about prosecution or the aggressive side of counter-trafficking. We also look to protection and prevention, or the softer side of human trafficking. And you're correct that in the past 9 months that you've been the head of CFO, IACAT has been active. And even prior to that, IACAT has been active. And that is part and parcel of our commitment to counter human trafficking. And hopefully the U.S. State Department sees that continued activity, that continued aggression to counter human trafficking, and hopefully we'll be able to maintain our tier ranking for a full decade.
Yeah. So is Tier 1, for those who are not familiar with, is this the gold standard for measuring the level or the government's intervention against trafficking, or is that, or do you watch any other metric?
That is a big deal.
Okay.
That is a big deal to measure a country's counter-human trafficking efforts. Because out of almost 200 countries that are rated by the U.S. State Department, only 30 have Tier 1 ranking.
Okay.
Only around 30. And a lot of developed countries who have higher GDP per capita than the Philippines actually have Tier 2 ranking. So again, I reiterate what I said earlier. It's not about the incidence of human trafficking, but it's about the commitment and the effort of the country to counter human trafficking.
Right. So again, maybe need to take a step back here, because some people may not understand, and this was evident. And I'll get back to this later during our trip to Palawan.
Yes.
What human trafficking is,
Yes.
because when they think about human trafficking, they think about women being sexually exploited or maybe forced labor. But I've come to realize it's a much broader definition that falls under human trafficking. But maybe you can explain it better than I can.
There's a legal definition in our laws, but I don't really want to go there.
Sure.
Because it's highly technical. But in essence, human trafficking is exploiting vulnerabilities of individuals to get them to perform particular purposes.
Right.
What are these vulnerabilities? The usual vulnerability is poverty.
Okay.
But other vulnerabilities include being part of a minority, being part of gender minority. Minority meaning age. Those are other vulnerabilities. And these vulnerabilities are exploited to be able to traffic these individuals for sexual, labor, or organ trafficking purposes.
Okay. So I heard that the United Nations was saying that since pandemic, I think they were looking at 2019 to 2022 worldwide, that the number of trafficking incidents has gone up.
Yes.
Something like 24%. But where are we? Are we following the trend? Are we holding steady? What's the general trend that you have been tracking here?
Well, we are making a dent in terms of victims that are rescued.
Okay.
In terms of prosecutions, in terms of convictions.
Okay.
We are making quite a dent. But you can't deny that human trafficking is really such a problem that to be able to for you to say that you're countering human trafficking, you must maintain your efforts.
Okay.
So clearly you're correct that in terms of the pandemic.
Okay.
New trends arose during the pandemic.
So that disrupted economies worldwide.
Yes, exactly. And two of the significant instances of human trafficking that became more significant during the pandemic, one was online sexual abuse and exploitation of children, especially in the Philippines, because a lot of families found themselves indoor and found themselves lacking work. That's why, sadly, some of these families decided to traffic their own children for 𝐂𝐡𝐚𝐢𝐫 purposes to produce child sexual abuse and exploitation material.
Right.
Another type of human trafficking that surged during the pandemic was POGOs, was labor trafficking in POGOs, because the POGOs their principal business, which was online gambling, saw a significant decline. These enterprises had to resort to other forms of business, and that's where they came into scamming, and to be able to force their workers to engage in scamming, they had to traffic these workers.
Right. So you mentioned that online sexual abuse, particularly of children, the president has been pretty firm on doing something about that. What are the DOJ's marching orders? What's the main thrust or focus now to combat that?
The marching orders are not just to continue our steadfast efforts to combat 𝐂𝐡𝐚𝐢𝐫 or online sexual abuse and exploitation of children, but to enhance these efforts as well with greater collaboration among the different agencies. Because Philippines was identified as a global hotspot when it comes to 𝐂𝐡𝐚𝐢𝐫 because of a lot of factors that converged to make the Philippines very vulnerable. These factors included not just poverty, but also the aptitude of Filipinos for the English language. Also the inclination of Filipinos to be tech savvy, as well as the penetration of the internet in the Philippines.
Right. So that sort of brings us back to what is trafficking, because I think sadly I've heard, in the news, some parents justifying that actually because there's no physical contact, that it's merely, children in front of a camera, although they're getting payment from the viewers. So I think because most people, would associate trafficking with movement of people, right? But in this particular case, as you said, many were shuttered at home because, going out was prohibited. But so that, as you were saying a while ago, also is trafficking, even though there's no movement and there's no physical contact between the victim and I guess the perpetrators.
I really like what you said, Secretary, that one of the misnomers about human trafficking is that it has to be something like what happened in the movie Taken.
Sure.
Right?
Yes.
Where
It's a kidnapping.
a young woman was
Yeah.
just taken against her
Yeah.
will and transported within a particular across different countries, internationally transported for purposes of sex trafficking. There doesn't have to be transportation in the
Right.
case of human trafficking. If you look into our laws, a variety of acts can constitute an act of human trafficking. It's not just transportation. Something as simple as employing or offering or harboring an individual can constitute an act of human trafficking. And that's exactly what the case in online sexual abuse and exploitation of children.
Yeah.
Even if these children do not are in place in their own homes because their sexual services or sexual exploitation is being offered to foreign nationals abroad, that constitutes human trafficking.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that there's a legal definition for it, but and you know, as we've established, I mean, it's a broader concept
Yes.
than what most people realize. But do you think there are certain practices, maybe within Asia or maybe even within the Philippines, that we didn't consider before as trafficking,
Yes.
but maybe would now fall under that legal definition? Because, you know, forced labor, for
Yes.
instance, unpaid household
Yes.
workers,
Well,
would that be considered trafficking? Or?
forced labor is part of the definition of human trafficking.
Okay.
But there are two very contemporary trends
Okay.
that arose, and we realize it is a form of human trafficking. One is what I mentioned earlier in the POGO. So
Okay.
what we call the term for that is forced criminality.
Okay.
When individuals are being forced to
do a
perform
criminal act, yeah.
criminal acts, and that is a form of human trafficking. And one of the challenges there is that sometimes these individuals are actually consent to being where they are because
Right.
they are convinced by the money that they can earn.
Right.
And at the same time, one of the debates there when it comes to forced criminality is, should we really let these individuals get away with the criminal acts that they did
Right.
because they invoke victimhood as victimhood under human trafficking.
So you make me nervous a bit because it seems that we have a lot on our plate now with
We do.
Advocom, just to create more public awareness about what is illegal and what is actually human trafficking.
And that's just one. Forced criminality is just one. Another very recent trend that arose is surrogacy. Illegal surrogacy of Filipinas who go abroad under surrogacy arrangements to give birth to children under these surrogacy arrangements. Sadly, if you remember the case in Cambodia, where there were 20 Filipinos who were arrested, who were detained, some of them were convicted because surrogacy is illegal in Cambodia, right? And the Philippines had to jump through a lot of hoops to be able to negotiate for their pardon and to be able to bring them back to the Philippines. That is yet another example of an emerging trend of human trafficking that we in IACAT have to address.
Right. So that's very interesting. I want to ask you more questions about that, but I just have to the station has to make a living. We'll be right back with the Chairman's report. We're talking to Undersecretary Nicolas, Felix.
Calling all young, independent, and professional creators. Great news! Cinebata 2025 is extending its deadline. You now have more time to submit your short videos, animations, or documentaries that reflect this year's theme, the magic of peace. Extended deadline for submission of entries is on July 25, 2025. No registration fees required. For details, visit or contact the following.
Meow! Kumusta mga sayanista?
Let's go, mga sayanista! Halina't sumama kina Kuya Ro at Agham sa kanilang nakaka-excite na adventures habang natututo ng kamangha-manghang lessons about science and technology.
Oh, mga sayanista, makinig na mabuti.
Sabay-sabay tayong mag-explore, mag-eksperimento at mag-enjoy sa Sayanista tuwing linggo, alas 4 ng hapon.
Don't be late ha! Dito lang sa IBC 13!
Serbisyo sa kapwa ang prioridad.
Magandang araw po sa inyo lahat mga kaibigan. Ito po si Rose Solangon, ang inyong kagabay at kaaksyon.
Para sa kaunlaran at kaayusan ng bawat komunidad. Samahan si Rose Solangon na alamin ang mga programang pinapangunahan ng mga lokal na pamahalaan. Sa Gabay at Aksyon, tuwing linggo, alas 11:30 ng umaga. Dito sa IBC 13.
Welcome back to the Chairman's Report. I'm 𝐂𝐡𝐚𝐢𝐫𝐬𝐚. We're talking to Undersecretary Nicky, if I may call that.
Of course, you can.
So I just want, before we leave the topic, you were talking about the surrogacy, and
Yes.
that's quite interesting because it captured also the attention of the national media
Yes.
here in the Philippines. But my question is, we see surrogacy, I suppose, in the U.S. or in the Western Hemisphere, and all the while I thought it was acceptable
Yes.
and legal, especially those maybe for people in a same-sex marriage or people who can't have children naturally. Maybe if you can just clarify, for what was the issue in Cambodia?
Okay.
You're saying that Cambodia has a specific law
That prohibits.
that prohibits that.
Yes. Well, the issue with surrogacy is, first of all, there's really no law that governs surrogacy in the Philippines. So Philippine law is silent in
That's
terms
the
of
gap,
the
yeah.
that's the gap in terms of the legality or illegality of surrogacy, as well as the treatment of the children who are born out of a surrogacy arrangement. And the thing is, some Filipinos are exploited to enter into these surrogacy agreements because they can actually earn significant amount of money from such a contract. From what I heard, surrogacy arrangements can yield them around 500,000 pesos.
Wow.
On top of the monthly benefits that they can gain from that.
Wow.
But the problem is, as we saw in Cambodia, that surrogacy is illegal in Cambodia.
Okay.
And it put them in quite a predicament when they were apprehended.
Okay.
Right? So that's why for the Philippines, whenever the Bureau of Immigration is able to realize, to discover that a Filipina is trying to exit the Philippines on the basis of a surrogacy agreement, they defer the departure of that Filipina, and we actually pursue criminal action against the people who tried to bring that Filipina out of the Philippines for violation of the human trafficking law.
So maybe just to clarify, if someone is offered something like that, is there a DOJ office that they can check to see if it's actually legal, or they won't get into trouble? Or is that something, we have the 1343 action.
Yeah.
Is that something that they can also ask
course.
from the action line?
They can do that. First of all, if you are considering such an arrangement, please don't, because that arrangement is not. We don't recognize that under the Philippines.
Okay.
And chances are, if you are discovered at the airport, you will not be allowed to board.
I see.
And second, if someone does offer you that kind of arrangement, please call 1343 or get in touch with IACAT through our other channels, and we will look into the matter.
Okay, so be cautious.
Yes.
Okay, when it comes to those kinds of arrangements. Related to that, the Bureau of Immigration issued a statement a few days ago warning against marriage scams. What's the situation there? What's the I guess the
Yes.
modus operandi of these traffickers?
Before I even go there, please allow me, Secretary,
Sure.
to just discuss this function of the Bureau of Immigration,
Okay.
which is to see to it that Filipinos who travel abroad travel for legitimate purposes,
Right.
and they are not being put in a position where they may be trafficked or victimized in other ways. So the Bureau of Immigration has taken flack for this function of theirs, but this is a function that they have to do for the protection of Filipinos. And a lot of Filipinos, their departures have been deferred for a variety of reasons. One is what you said, Filipinos who were discovered to be entering into this forced marriage or illegal marriage arrangement. Another is what we discussed earlier when it comes to surrogacy arrangements.
Right.
Another is if it's discovered that Filipinos do want to work in a scam hub abroad. Now let's go back to this forced marriage agreement. That's correct. The Bureau of Immigration recently deferred the departure or offloaded a Filipina who they realized was in a forced marriage arrangement. When the Bureau of Immigration interviewed the Filipina and her companion, and they were able to bring out, to evoke from them their true purpose of travel. And the Bureau of Immigration was even able to check the marriage certificate that they presented, which turned out to be fake. Because there are a lot of instances where Filipinas pretend that they're going abroad as the spouse of a foreigner, but they end up going there working as a household worker, being exploited, being abused, or undergoing something even worse.
Right. That's pretty challenging because CFO, many people might not know, is also part of that security layer, and that we provide guidance and counseling for the spouses of foreign nationals, and sometimes part of that process is to identify potential victims, but we get the flack when we ask for more documentation or the background of the foreign spouse. But what are some of the, I suppose, red flags or maybe telltale signs that maybe the marriage is not real? Because the problem with us is if they leave the Philippines with a tourist visa, then they don't go through CFO, but they may leave in the Philippines by some other means that you were describing.
Well, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
It's really difficult because, again, they don't necessarily fall under your radar.
Right.
But if they do, right, we're kind of the bad guy.
Right.
Because we're in that, in some instances, we're getting in the way of their employment. Here, we're getting in the way of love.
Right.
Right. So it's really difficult. But then again, an interview to see if they really know each other, I think that's one thing that we can do. And end of the day, they are still individuals with their own free will.
Right.
So we just do what we can.
Right.
And if they still decide to go,
right.
What we do is that if trouble arises, we'll just be there for them again.
Right. Well, the Philippines, as people will probably remember, has an anti-mail order bride law, right? And then that's forcefully implemented. But with technology now, I mean, you don't, you just before you would just scan the papers for ads, but now there are dating apps and all sorts of I suppose websites that you can meet other people. Is there a discussion in IACAT or maybe in DOJ or maybe in between DOJ and maybe some legislators on maybe addressing those, maybe to help strengthen the intention of the anti-mail order spouse law because of these new apps that have now appeared that was not present before.
Well, we're definitely at the level of implementation.
Yeah.
When it comes to mail order bride, we do rely on official documents to determine if the marriage does exist.
Right.
And when it comes to apps, well, it's certainly something that we have to catch up on.
Right. So I don't want to maybe talk bad about a particular country, but maybe are there as I said, red flags that people should watch out for? I mean, we say that, for instance, if you haven't met your spouse, and then you're all of a sudden, asked to leave the country, and the first time you meet, or it's here in the Philippines, or maybe you have not met, But are there any other advice or tips that we can give to people? Because sometimes, as you said, love is pretty difficult to interfere with, and sometimes they might feel like they found their soulmate, and then here we are, our CFO and DOJ. Of course, we're trying to do our due diligence, right, to make sure they're not victimized. But what advice can we give to people?
I guess it's about vigilance.
Okay.
Just be vigilant. Don't let yourself just be carried away by these promises or a rosy picture that you see. And at the same time, please trust in the government.
Right.
I know it seems that sometimes we get in the way of employment or love or something that you want.
Yes.
But end of the day, the government is just here to protect particular interests. And in this instance, it's the interests of individuals, Filipino individuals who may be susceptible or vulnerable to human trafficking or other evils out there.
Right. Is there discussion among countries? I know because DOJ, of course, you talk to your counterparts all over the world. But Are there, and has this come up in any of the fora that the DOJ has attended, and maybe what has been shared, and what can we learn from that?
For some modus of human trafficking, there is ample discussion between the different countries. Like, for example, here in Southeast Asia, there is widespread discussion on the issue of forced criminality, particularly in the POGOs or similar establishments across the region. As you know, in the Philippines, the forced criminality, the scamming, the human trafficking happened in the POGOs. In other countries, for example, in Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar, they happen in similar establishments as well. And most of the victims do come from the region, Southeast Asia or even China, India. So there is ample discussion.
Is there an ASEAN agenda? Or
it has been.
Maybe it should be, but has it come up at all? Or?
It has been tackled in ASEAN, but ASEAN is not the only forum to discuss this particular issue. In fact, IACAT, along with CFO, we've initiated both bilateral and multilateral discussions with our counterparts on this specific issue.
All right. Well, 𝐂𝐡𝐚𝐢𝐫 will be right back with the chairman's report. Very interesting discussion. Please stay tuned.
Kulang ang araw mo kung wala ang kids na hindi lang cute at charming, kundi super talented din.
It's a time for the people of Iloilo to show their love for their faith and celebrate a rich culture. Young shows the world how rich and diverse Filipino culture is.
Panoorin sila sa Talents Academy every Saturday at 4:30 p.m. sa IBC 13. Tagapaglikha ng batas. Binubuwag ang katiwalian. Lingkod ng sambayanan. Kilalanin at alamin ang Senado ng Pilipinas. Kasama si Catherine Villar, tuwing linggo, alas 9:30 ng umaga, dito sa IBC 13.
With them. Of course, it's me.
Discover the heart of the Filipino-Chinese community. We'll bring you closer to vibrant cultures. Delicious cuisines, inspiring success stories, and the latest community events. Right here on Chinatown TV. Catch us every Sunday at 9 a.m. on IBC 13.
Welcome back to the Chairman's Report. We're talking to Yusek Nicky T at the DOJ. Sir, one of the interesting things that I experienced was this trip to Palawan to look at irregular migration corridors. But as I understand it, this was the second actual leg.
Yes.
And that last year there was another leg that covered Zamboanga, Sulu, Tawi-Tawi.
Yes.
What's the purpose of these? And maybe for that matter, what are irregular migration corridors?
So the irregular migration corridors, or the so-called backdoors, these are more in the limelight now because the Bureau of Immigration has been doing a pretty good job in our formal airports or seaports to defer the departure of potential human trafficking victims. That's why these human trafficking victims, as well as their handlers, had to resort to informal routes to get them out of the country. And the informal routes are precisely those irregular migration corridors. And the two of the principal irregular migration corridors in the Philippines are the Zamba-Sulta route, which is what you mentioned, the one that we visited last year, and the Palawan route, which is what we visited together. So through these routes, Filipinos are able to leave the country via Malaysia. And from Malaysia, they're able to go to their desired destinations, whether that's somewhere else in Southeast Asia or in the Middle East or somewhere else. And it is there that sadly many of them end up as human trafficking victims.
Right. So the global statistics say about or nearly 80% of the victims are women. Is that
Yes.
pretty much mirrored the situation in the Philippines?
It used to be the case,
Oh, not anymore.
but because of the issue on forced criminality,
Okay.
a lot more and more of the victims who are coming out of these irregular migration corridors are males.
And you know, the trip that I participated in Palawan is quite interesting. I didn't realize there were IP people who were sometimes victimized. I guess these were agriculture workers lured to work abroad, but I guess without a visa, without any employment contract, and for as low as 5,000 pesos.
Yes.
And also men. I mean, well, most of these agriculture workers were men, but you know, not the typical or conventional idea of a trafficking victim.
Yes, you're correct, Secretary. In terms of vulnerability, indigenous people can be vulnerable, especially if the indigenous group is one of the poorer or less privileged groups in the country. And you're correct that in their situation, many of the victims are actually men who end up trafficked in industries such as palm oil in Malaysia, or even in fishing, as fishers across the region, or sometimes as far as Africa.
Yeah, that was an eye-opener, really. And what struck me, I don't know if you remember this, in Brooks Point when we were having a town hall meeting with some of the local government officials, and there was this gentleman who said, well, I guess trying to get at the gist of what is is trafficking, and his comment was, I don't know if you remember this, pag nabayaran naman, hindi trafficking. Pag hindi nabayaran, that's trafficking. I guess part of the challenge, as I was saying earlier, on trying to pin down what is actually the crime.
That's a misnomer. A misnomer that not just payment but consent of the victim does not negate human trafficking. Even if a victim consents, even if an individual consents to being trafficked, he can still be a victim of human trafficking.
Right.
So, and that is one of the challenges that we have to generate more awareness, not just on the issue of human trafficking, but also on the nuances of human trafficking. To be able to correct such misnomers, such as the one that you pointed out.
And then you were saying a while ago about the online sexual abuse. You know, as we talked about earlier, sometimes the parents would justify and say, well, there's no physical contact, or sometimes the parents are the ones touching the children rather than, you know, the pedophiles themselves online. So I think it's really a pretty challenging task. Just the public awareness aspect.
That's correct.
Of
That's
this
correct.
campaign,
Precisely. Some of the justification of parents who victimize their own children is that when the abuse of a child is being live streamed to a pedophile abroad, it's the parent who actually touches the child, right? And for them, it's not abuse because it would be okay with their child, but the child doesn't really know any better that there's abuse that's happening. So that's the reason why there has to be more awareness. But then again, a lot of these parents, they're actually arrested and imprisoned for this kind of offense, and hopefully that aggressive approach of the government against them would set an example and reduce the incidence of this crime.
Yeah, so maybe just to clarify, what's the penalty for something, for an offense like that? I mean, you said jail term. Like how long are we talking about, and is there a fine?
Life imprisonment. It can reach life imprisonment.
Wow. And then going back to this irregular migration corridors, I think one of the stories that I remember was that because like Palawan is such a beautiful destination for tourists, that sometimes the foreigner who's the recruiter doesn't stand out. They blend in, right? But what can be done? Because we don't want to scare people away from Palawan, obviously. But what should people watch out for? What are maybe the things that should make them suspicious and maybe trigger a call to 1343?
Well, it's definitely awareness. Awareness of this phenomenon of human trafficking. When it comes in Palawan or even in Zambosulta, when it comes to the irregular migration corridor, one of the biggest flags there is that if the person traveling is not from there. The person, they call this dayo. Mga dayo, no? And if they are traveling in Zamboanga to Tawi-Tawi and Tawi-Tawi to somewhere else, that's already a red flag. And some of our law enforcers from PNP to Coast Guard do monitor these
Right.
kinds of incidences. What you mentioned earlier when it comes to foreigners who are engaged in acts of trafficking, I think that would be more germane to maybe sex trafficking in resorts or other similar establishments. Clearly, one of the biggest red flag there, if the foreigners with a minor.
Okay.
Right, and if the foreigners with a minor,
it doesn't go together, right?
it doesn't go together at all. And if that happens, we truly encourage people who witness or see something like that to call 1343 or get in touch with the authorities.
What also struck me during that entire trip was sometimes some of the, I think the prosecutors that we were talking to, they were recounting,
Yes.
I think, a particular case. And they were saying that, some of the people who lured the victims were actually known to the
Yes.
victims. Maybe a respected member of the barangay, or sometimes even in the worst case, a relative.
Yes, yes.
Right? So, is it just just a function of more awareness, or maybe we need to, in use a local term, sampulan or stuff. Sampulan yung iba dyan.
Clearly, it's both.
Yeah.
It's both. It's about awareness, because sometimes the relatives or the individuals who recruit or lure, sometimes they don't know any better, and because they probably have a commission or some interest there, they have that incentive to lure or recruit. And at the same time, clearly making an example of those individuals would send that very strong signal, not just to foster awareness, but to create a deterrent to similar activity.
So if you're not the actual recruiter, you're just say someone getting a commission, as you describe it, do you get the same penalty?
Oh, yes.
Same.
You can. And there are multiple acts of trafficking. It can be recruitment, employment, transportation, harboring. And if you got a commission there, at the very least, you can be an accessory or an accomplice. But worst case scenario, you can be a principal or co-conspirator.
Right. And the interesting thing there, I mean, there are obvious red flags, but I'm surprised that people don't pick up on it. For instance, the farm workers going abroad without an employment contract, or they are transported from their supposed place of work not by plane but by boat. So should raise some questions there already. But for people who might see something or experience something like that, what is the recommendation? Do they, besides calling 134, do they go to the local prosecutor, or do they approach a local social welfare office, or is this police, or what's the typical, or any local government official? What's the recommendation there?
Definitely call 1343.
Okay.
But I think even more important, hopefully don't put yourself in that situation.
Right.
But the thing is, a lot of our Filipinos are very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And they are blinded by the possibility of making money abroad.
Yeah.
And they're actually willing to go through the gauntlet, so to speak. So hopefully more awareness would disincentivize or discourage Filipinos from undergoing such a process.
Yeah. So, were there any other key takeaways? You mentioned the year before's trip to Sambasulta, which I wasn't able to attend because I wasn't the CFO yet. But are there emerging takeaways that and then maybe are there future study tours or visits to other places?
For the irregular migration corridor visits, as well as any form of human trafficking, it's engaging more stakeholders. And in those instances, I think the local government plays a very key role. I think we were able to accomplish that somewhat to generate more awareness across local governments when we visited Palawan, and hopefully we'll be able to do that again. That's why next year we will have the third leg of our irregular migration corridor visit. The intention is for the first part of that voyage to be in Sarangani, in Balut Island, because there's another irregular migration corridor there, and we will hopefully be able to go back to parts of Tawi-Tawi and Palawan as well. And then we intend to add something else, because our past two visits have been mostly engaging the different stakeholders there, particularly local governments.
Yes.
But one thing we realized is that the vulnerabilities of the people there have to be addressed. And that's one of the things that the local governments did tell us. Like, it's not just about poverty, it's also about availability of basic documentation like birth certificates or passports. That's why the intention of the third leg of this irregular migration corridor visit is that it's not just going to be a visit, there's going to be some kind of outreach program as well, with our partners from DSWD bringing care packages, and as well as the possibility of bringing agencies like DFA PSA or even the NBI to document those individuals there who are in need of documentation.
Yeah. Because some of these places were remote.
Very remote.
I
Very
only
remote.
made it to Brooks Point,
Yes.
but you went all the way to Balabac.
Balabac.
Right. And I heard from our team who joined you was that, in some of these places, the products in local stores were from Malaysia,
Yes.
and then they actually preferred the Malaysian
Yes.
currency when purchasing things rather than the peso. So I guess my point is, government has to make its presence felt, but the reality is that these places are far away,
They're very,
and
very-
that they probably identify with our neighbor rather than
Yes.
with Manila.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's one thing we've realized after the 2 voyages is that it's such a multifaceted issue.
Yes.
It's not just
It's
about
much more complicated.
It's much more
Yeah,
complicated.
yeah.
It's not just about economics.
Right.
It's also about culture.
Right.
You have a lot of the people there who have made a practice of traveling to the other side, no? to
Right.
Sabah or parts of Malaysia for
For generations.
yeah,
Yeah.
they call it barter.
Right.
Right. And aside from that, there's also political.
Right.
Because we have to admit that the Sabah claim does make it complicated.
Right.
Just bring some complications to our ability to address the plight of our nationals there.
Right. Right.
So it's so multifaceted
Right.
that whenever we go there, we just aim to do what we can,
Right.
and at the same time acknowledge that there's still so much more that has to be done.
Right. I want to go back to what you mentioned earlier, the correlation between the pogos and human trafficking, and that many of these were found out to be
Yes.
engaging in this crime as well. Many of the victims that were rescued from Myanmar, we welcomed some of
Yes.
them when we came back. I think a second batch. I was surprised to see that some of them were
Go back.
not the not the provinciano innocent,
Yes.
but they were actually had been working in BPOs before, or maybe pogos before. Is that a continuing threat? I mean, is that we have to be vigilant there as well?
That's one of the realizations that we
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
during the height of this issue with pogos.
Yeah.
Not just here in the Philippines, but also abroad. The profile of the trafficking victim changed. Trafficking victims in those establishments, at least at the start, were very different from usual trafficking victims. A lot of them were educated, a lot of them were college graduates, very tech savvy. You're right,
Yes.
they had experience working in BPOs.
Right.
And yet because of the appeal of the money that they could earn, or they were promised that they could earn,
Right.
they put themselves in a position to be trafficked.
Right. Well, sadly, they say initially they were treated well, but
Yes,
eventually
that's correct.
they weren't getting the pay that
That's
they were
correct.
promised, and some of them were
Tortured, yeah.
tortured, and I guess isolated from
Yes.
their families. So,
Yes.
very sad story. But we'll have to take another quick break,
Yes.
𝐂𝐡𝐚𝐢𝐫, and we'll be right back with the chairman's report. Please stay tuned.
Kami ang bago ninyong kakampi.
Bibigyang linaw ang bawat hinaing at katanungan
Wala, hinahanap namin siya nung araw na yun eh.
para makamit ang nararapat na katarungan.
Sa nangyari po sa kanya at sa nilalagana po na pang-aabuso po sa mga kababaihan.
Dahil hindi pwedeng may naaagrabyado. Ang mali ay itatama. Ang tama ay ipaglalaban.
Ito ang programa kung saan laging patas ang batas.
Legally Speaking, panoorin tuwing linggo, alas 3 ng hapon sa IBC 13. Sa bawat hakbang ng bayan, may kamay na umaalalay. Sa bawat pag-asa, may lider na tunay na naglilingkod. Kilalanin at alamin ang ginagampanang tungkulin ni Pangulong Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. para sa isang bagong Pilipinas. Samahan si Princess Jordan sa Bagong Pilipinas PBBM Lingkod ng Bayan. Tuwing linggo, alas 8:30 ng umaga, dito sa IBC 13.
Welcome back to the Chairman's Report. I'm 𝐂𝐡𝐚𝐢𝐫𝐬𝐿. We're talking to 𝐷sec Nicky of the DOJ.
Yes.
One of the things that our teams have been working on is this Break All Chains award. Maybe this is a good opportunity for you to drum up some interest about that. But you said a while ago that this is just a resurgence or a reintroduction of a reintroduction of something that was done before. But maybe talk about the Break All Chains award.
Well, June 30 is World Day Against Trafficking.
Right.
And prior to World Day Against Trafficking for the entire month of, July 30. Prior to July 30, we've had the full month, we've had a lot of lead-up activities to July 30. And on July 30, we're going to have the Break All Chains awarding, which is about, it's like, you can call it the Oscar Awards of IACAT, Oscar Awards of counter-trafficking in the Philippines, where you recognize different stakeholders who've made a significant contribution to counter-trafficking efforts for the past few years. We have different categories from law enforcement to social workers to NGOs. And the purpose is, first and foremost, it's about awareness, creating awareness on this issue of human trafficking. And second, it's about giving credit to the people who made a difference. Because maybe most of us don't really see it, but there's a significant group of individuals who are contributing to our fight of human trafficking. And from time to time, it's just correct that we acknowledge them, we give them credit for their significant efforts.
And then I understand that some of the awards go to individuals and other goes to organizations or institutions. So are they just limited to government institutions or the private sector, or who's eligible?
Right now, NGOs, we give awards to NGOs as well, because if there's one thing that is lauded by our international counterparts is that the Philippines has a very robust NGO sector in countering human trafficking. In fact, in IACAT, 3 members of the council are actually from NGOs, and aside from them, so many other NGOs contribute to our fight against human trafficking. So aside from government partners, we do intend to recognize NGO partners as well.
So are you trying to tell people that, look, we need help? I mean, this is it takes more than just the DOJ and the CFO and the DSWDs to work against. It's really a whole concerted effort, a country effort.
Yes, it's not just a whole of government approach; it's a whole of nation approach.
Right.
In fact, you can say that it's a global approach, because human trafficking, it's not just government who has to be there. It's not just the national or the local government. It's not just NGOs. Even the private sector has a role in human trafficking, and even individuals have a role in the fight against human trafficking.
And so the awards are going to be at the Metropolitan Theater,
That's correct.
the beautiful
Yes.
theater in Manila. Is it open to the public? Can people go, or?
I'll have to get back to you on that if people can't go, but certainly we will live stream the event for people to be able to see that event.
Okay. And, besides getting the message out there, are there, clear or identified, maybe policy gaps? I mean, you mentioned the surrogacy law, for instance, that needs to be addressed. Are there other things that maybe, because of course the country has many priorities, and there are global forces that we're also dealing with. But maybe, as you said, we need this is important, right? Are there, specific things that maybe DOJ and maybe IACAT itself would want to push? Yeah.
There are. Our anti-human trafficking law was amended recently in 2022. But even after then, we realize that gaps do exist. One is exactly what you said about surrogacy, and another has to do with forced criminality.
Right.
Because when the human trafficking law was amended, this notion of forced criminality in the Pogos wasn't really on our minds.
Right, it's not in the radar.
It wasn't on the radar. Senator Ontiveros refers to it as a black swan.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not just about the modus, it's not just about the type of human trafficking, it's also how to address it. For example, when it comes to these Pogos, if you saw them, they were not just whole buildings, they were actually whole compounds where the trafficking took place, where the victims were not just housed, they actually worked there, they had a self-contained community there.
Right.
And one of the problems that we had is that whenever we tried to secure a search warrant to enter those premises, the courts would be constrained by this concept that a search warrant has to be limited, not general in scope.
Right.
So whenever we entered the premises of, let's say, a
There were
multi-story building,
limitations,
and our
right.
search warrant was only for a particular floor, it wasn't that easy for us to access that other floor. So this phenomenon has to be factored in to amendment to human trafficking law. Aside from that, another issue has to do with the forfeiture of the properties that are used for human trafficking. We are trying to do that right now when it comes to the illegal Pogos, but there's still some gaps that have to be addressed as well.
Right. You say, the president came out strongly about online gambling. Is there some connection there? Because we're talking about Pogos.
Yes.
Right. Does that fall under also the things that you are monitoring that may be or could be related to trafficking?
Well, per se, illegal online gambling may not necessarily amount to human trafficking.
Okay.
But there is that possibility that some of the people behind online gambling, especially those that are underground, may have come from the illegal Pogos. When their business was shut down, they had to transition to
Right.
some other business, and maybe this is one of the lines of businesses that they got into.
Right. So when you say transition, some of the illegal Pogos were presenting themselves as legitimate BPO. So how could people tell? Sometimes they may be hired to work on something, but they don't realize it's actually illegal.
That was one of the biggest problems prior to the president's prohibition of Pogos, is that these Pogos were able to rely on a veneer of legality in the form of their license from PAGCOR, in the form of their articles of incorporation from the SEC, as well as any other licenses they secure from local governments. And with that license, with those licenses, it wasn't really that easy for us to penetrate and look into their activities. To be able to determine if something illegal is happening, it has to come from within.
Right.
So if there's an individual who realizes that what they are being forced to do is scamming or something that is not legal or what they signed up for, so that's a problem, and they can report it. They can report it to the authorities for the authorities to take action.
Right. So is that another area for maybe intervention, or maybe is there a policy gap there as well, or maybe it's just more procedural thing that maybe needs to adjust to the situation?
It's for implementation now. Clearly, after EO 74, where the president banned Pogos, one of the things that had to be done there after the repatriation or deportation of foreign nationals is for law enforcement to continue to crack down on those that have transitioned. Because even after the declaration of illegality, a lot of these Pogos transitioned in their modus operandi, and they shifted to mom and pop or smaller scale operations. Right. We've done that. We've continued to do that shortly after or early this year, and we will continue to do that if we see some more.
Right. So it's a very daunting task because similar to maybe like the drug problem, you're not just dealing with local perpetrators, but this is human trafficking is global, right? So, what can be done there? Because your reach is only up to our border, but when maybe the mastermind or the syndicates are based elsewhere, in some cases maybe even state sponsored. Right? So, what's the approach, or what can be done?
Partnerships.
Okay.
Partnerships with our counterparts abroad play a very significant role when it comes to that concern. As you well know, we were able to bring 𝐼𝐿𝐴 home because of a very solid partnership with Indonesia. So when it comes to the transnational aspect of human trafficking, as well as any other transnational crimes, I think collaboration with our counterparts abroad is the key.
Right. But for arresting suspects. But is there
Yes.
like maybe a more proactive
Yes.
approach, or maybe a regional or global? I don't know,
Yeah.
where is this discussed even? Is it at the UN?
Yeah.
Is it at Interpol?
Interpol.
Okay.
Interpol is the venue.
Okay.
We can ask for an Interpol red notice for any fugitives, for Interpol, for all of law enforcement that are parts of Interpol to be able to take action if that
Okay.
fugitive is found within their borders.
Right. And are we able to identify maybe say what country it comes from? I mean, not to maybe talk bad about a particular
Yeah.
neighbor, but is that even possible?
Well, when it comes to Interpol, as long as the country is a member of Interpol, they'll be able to
Okay.
help us out.
I see. Well, that's pretty interesting and pretty
Yes.
challenging.
Yes.
You said, Nicky, it's very interesting to talk
Yes.
to you, and as I said earlier, this is something I think that we can talk about for hours
Yes.
and hours, and we probably have to do another episode of
Yes.
this. But thank you very much for your time. But before we go, maybe you want to leave a message for our
Okay.
audience?
Well, first of all, we'd like to thank you, Secretary King. Thank you to the CFO for having DOJ and IACAT here in your show today. These kinds of discussions, this kind of publicity goes a long way for IACAT and the Philippines counter-trafficking efforts. Because when it comes to counter-trafficking, it's not just about prosecution of the perpetrators, it's not just about protection of the victims, but it's also about prevention. And when it comes to prevention, awareness plays a very significant role. So hopefully, we will be able to reach more and more Filipinos with your show, as well as any other activities, any other advocacy or publicity activities that we have. And hopefully Filipinos, after watching this episode, are more aware of human trafficking and will willingly be part of the fight against human trafficking.
So our fingers are crossed that you'll make it to the 10th year of having
Yes.
tier
Hopefully.
one status
We'll
with
get
all
that.
these efforts. And of course, we'll be right there to help you. I want to thank our host, IBC 13, for this opportunity to talk about this program. And, so we mentioned earlier, ask you to report any suspicious human trafficking activity to our action line 1343. This is Dante Klinkang. This has been the Chairman's Report. I'll see you next week.